Welcome to Flap TV. Our guest this episode, on the left, Heather DeJesus of Fitchburg, and on the right, Daniel DeBrule of Leominster. Issue 1. In the past month, the Fitchburg City Council has appointed 3 people to fill vacancies on the City Council and School Committee. There is criticism in some circles that even though there were qualified minority candidates who applied for these positions, all 3 appointments were Caucasians, which leaves these 2 representative boards with a 100% Caucasian makeup. Minorities make up just over 1/3 of Fitchburg's population, and in Leominster, they make up about 1/4 of the population. We can see Fitchburg's population on this graph, about 74% white. Excuse me, this is Leominster, 17.5% Hispanic. So we can see the diversity there, and in Fitchburg, do we have Fitchburg's up? Close? Okay, Fitchburg's, I believe, is, there we go with Fitchburg, 63% white. You can see a large Hispanic population. But again, all elected boards in Leominster and Fitchburg are made up of Caucasians. So the question for the board is, what factor should diversity play in our elected boards and also in hiring in government positions? Michael Della Monica.
Well, it should be a factor. I'm a little skeptical of it being the factor, though. For instance, I believe in taking each individual case on its own merits. In the Fitchburg situation that you cited with the school committee, they elected 2 highly qualified individuals, and in that case, it happened to be that they were 2 Caucasian individuals. I do know in the city council, in the race to fill the other councilors had to fill the vacant city council seat when Mr. Tran went to the State House. I do know that George Rodriguez, a minority candidate, received a lot. Came in essentially second. Received a lot of endorsements from prominent city councilors and almost got in there. So that was a case where somebody was highly considered. So it kind of depends on the individual race and the individual candidates.
Daniel.
Well, just as John Robert wrote, the way to stop discrimination on the basis of race is to stop discrimination on the basis of race. And that rings true because I have experience as a union steward for 18 years on this at the government level. And what I found that it is a tool that you need, especially in long institutional like governmental domains. So it is needed. Unfortunately, the way it's used and interpreted goes a long way like anything else. And unfortunately, it's politicized. And what happens, there's a lot of good arguments on both sides, but what it really comes down to is the minority group that's technically reached down to, and it's, the reaching out to, who goes to where. That's skeptical, but whoever gets reached out to gets allotted minority positions in minority places. So, technically it keeps people down in a way, but it allows people in an institutional way. So it's good and bad.
Heather DeJesus.
With diversity brings innovation. I mean, we see that in anything from nature. We see that in the commercial sector as well. And if we think about politics, it's policy. Policy is of the people. The people should be represented. So while I don't think it should be the first thing we lead with, as you mentioned, I do think it needs to be a factor. We want to represent our community so everyone has a seat to the table.
Cindy.
I agree, actually. Same thing. I think it's definitely a role. We need more diversity, I think, without a doubt. I think it would be a good thing, but I don't think it should be the primary factor. I think its qualifications must come first. They must come first. So whoever's qualified, and then take it from there.
If you walk down into city council chambers in Leominster, when you walk in along all the walls, you'll see pictures of past city councils. Every year they take a picture of the city councils. Leominster's been a city since 1915. They have elections every 2 years, and there's 9 councilors. So there's about 500 opportunities to elect a minority to fill that seat. Yet Leominster has never elected a minority on the city council in nearly 500 opportunities. Is this a problem? Anyone?
I mean, how many?
Sounds like it is.
That's a good point. The last one that I can remember even running was Mario Lopez back in 91 or 93.
Well, I think it's a responsibility both on, those within the government and those outside of the government wanting to come in, that how many people really know how to run. I mean, myself didn't even know how to begin to pull papers until I started really asking other people. So I think to be more innovative, we should start reaching out and showing people how they can become more involved, because I think some people don't know how to get involved, and therefore that's maybe why we haven't seen more minorities run. But I think it's to our detriment to not reach out to pull more diversity in.
And to Michael's point, when we look at minority candidates running, there were qualified candidates that put their names in for that city council appointment. But other than Alexander Vera, who ran for mayor, none of those minorities had run a few months earlier for that seat. Georgie Rodriguez didn't run for the seat. The other gentleman, I forget his name, he did not run for the seat. In school committee, there was, I think, Kim Maxwell. She didn't run for school committee last year, even though there were contested races. So how much of it is a responsibility of the minority communities themselves to actually put candidates up?
I mean, for example, and I'm not necessarily, the Spanish American Center in Leominster, okay, has had roots in the community for years and years and years, well established, has a director there that's been there for forever, very well regarded, very well established. I bet you if perhaps somebody on their board or somebody prominently involved with the Spanish American Center who is Hispanic were to run for city council, were to run for office in Leominster, I would bet that they would receive a very positive, amount of votes.
I agree. I think so too.
There's definitely a big, there's a lot of great untapped resources out there in community leaders, but unfortunately there's a lot of laws in place to keep them involved from politics, like our religious leaders. There's some very, very stringent financial laws to keep them involved, away from politics, or any of their bright leaders, because they want to keep their churches going. So where do we go with schools? Our kids not really being taught that, but there's a push for that. Civil law going to be pushed in school here, so there's hope. Unfortunately, a lot of people are pushed into politics because they're driven on special interests or a particular issue, and the community of knowledge will take them as far as they can go. So. It's a tough
Well, I know
course.
just from personal experience having run, a barrier is financial. I mean, it is expensive to run. And so I think that, again, if we can find better ways to tap into the community, to tap into diversity, it's also intimidating. I mean, I'll be honest, just myself as a female, and I am Caucasian, if you haven't noticed, it is intimidating to start to run a campaign. So I think the more that we can help educate people on the processes and show people how they can financially make this happen, I think we can start to pull more diversity in. I think we all have to own it together, not just sit back and say, well, they're not running, so they can't get voted in.
Yeah.
So we talked about the minority communities not putting up candidates. There were minority applicants for the city council and school committee. The decisions were made. Should the city council have given more weight to diversity and made different decisions, or taking each on their own, did they pick the correct 3 candidates, Heather?
I would have liked to have seen a little more diversity. I mean, first, it's really exciting that we're now 33% female when we were predominantly male. So that's really exciting to see, at least in Fitchburg. But I do think it would have been nice to put a little bit more new faces, new ideas, just to help with new innovation. Fitchburg is in a unique situation where we need some innovation. We need innovation to help us move forward. Innovation comes from diverse areas. Yes, Donnelly is very well qualified, but he's been here before. I think some new fresh faces could have really helped out with this new current city council chamber.
Yeah.
Well, if anybody's rights were impeded or if they were dissuaded from running, that's a shame. And they have recourse. I mean, they have the MCAD. Nobody should be dissuaded from running for office. At least you can get your issue heard, and you'll be taken seriously. So, if people are being browbeaten not to run, like just today, I heard a story. An officer was told by his union not to get into politics because he's making too many waves. So. It goes both ways. If people are being browbeat by the supposed political appointed leadership and not getting mixed, a lot of questions to be asked. I'm trying to support campaigns where it's not, it's an issue-driven, not politics. So it doesn't matter. We're a melting pot. So it's kind of we're talking about an issue that's really a non-issue. We're all different people. So it's a pupil in power, and it becomes a class issue, class war.
Yeah, definitely. But it's got to be intimidating for some to go, when you look at it and you've got two cities there that they're all white. And then a lot of them have been in there for a long time. So for somebody new to come in and may not be well known, that can be very intimidating. A lot of people might just say, I won't have a chance, I'm not even going to bother. Unfortunately, I think
just the optics, just the visual of walking into City Council chamber in Leominster, and you see all the walls covered with pictures of Caucasians, not one minority in any of those pictures.
Yeah.
You know, what kind of message does that send for someone who's thinking about running?
I know it. It's a shame because I think it would be really good for the community, and I think that the people in the community they would feel as if they have a little bit more representation as well. Not that it shouldn't be a race issue, but I'm just saying people look to their neighborhoods, their peers, and so to have somebody in there that they feel is like, this guy's in there for me, would be a good thing.
Issue 2, last summer we saw Leominster High School students walk out of class and march downtown to protest what they considered to be lack of budget resources allocated to the Leominster school system. This past week we saw a walkout across the country of students who were protesting gun violence, and now we're hearing of a walkout that's going to be taking place in California with pro-life students protesting abortion. For student walkouts, walking out of school, skipping class, leaving a classroom you're supposed to be in, is this an act of civic engagement that we should be applauding, or is it an act of truancy that we should be disciplining, Daniel DeBrew?
Well, I'll be honest, I was very bad as a student. I was very truant. So, that being said, nowadays, I believe, as a parent and a family man, absolutely not. To have children of all stripes and sizes and graphs of knowledge on the streets, unsupervised, we have laws against that. We have truancy laws, we have delinquency to minor laws, we haul out all that. So that being said, I'm not against the kids being involved. There's ways for them to get involved, and if there's not, there's a problem. We have student council, we have the school committee meetings with open public access, we have the school administrator and staff that are angels and can be approached. You have NGOs like PTO, PTA they can get involved with, and individuals can get grants, loans, and make things happen like playgrounds and what have you. And vendors can get involved in districts and help make it better as well. So there's always a way for people to tap in and get their grievances heard. So if they're not being heard, what's the problem? You know, Massachusetts, we're a one-party state, so let's take a look at the bigger problem. Why can't the kids have their concerns be heard? Why don't they know that they can get pepper spray at 14 and protect themselves? You know, why don't we have these discussions at their level and engage them? We talk about reaching out to minorities. The kids are minorities, elderly, so sorry for ranting, but get passionate on these things.
Heather, regardless of the issue, walking out of school, acceptable or not?
I think it's actually not just a matter of truancy. If you think about any time that we've made significant progress that's been around civil engagement protests, someone's been truant. You can still be truant and you can still put across very meaningful change to happen. Massachusetts Law 76, Section 1, truancy is technically missing 7 days or more unexcused absences in a 6-month period. So this walkout isn't necessarily a matter of truancy as far as I'm concerned. I do think we should applaud this. And in fact, I referenced, I think it was Tinker versus Des Moines, 1976, or 69, I mean, where the Supreme Court ruled that a student's constitutional rights don't leave the second that you walk into the threshold of the school. Therefore, they have just as many rights as the rest of us do. I think we should applaud it. We want civil engagement. Starting young historically shows that they continue through adulthood. These are the kids who are going to turn into adults that are going to shape our lives, and we want them involved. And lastly, I say, look at our last elections. How many voters came out and voted? We don't have as much civil involvement as we want or we need to make change, so we should encourage it at a young age and hope that they sustain it.
Cindy.
I agree to a certain point, but no, I don't agree with walking out of school. If you do it, I admire it. I understand why you're doing it. A lot of great things happen in history from people doing what they were not supposed to be doing. but you should be disciplined, and that should be part of it. If you want to make a point of protesting and you get disciplined because you're not in school, that's part of it. That's the punishment you take to make your point. You know, I don't agree with teachers, and you know, there was a lot of issues with this last one where they walked out, other kids stayed in the school. Some of them were disciplined for staying in a classroom and not going to somewhere else, and you know, that shouldn't be taken. You're there for school. If you want to protest during or after, I mean, before or after or on the weekends, whatever, that's great. I love the First Amendment. I totally support it. And if you do it, then be prepared to be disciplined. That goes with protesting.
Michael.
I agree mostly with Cindy. Slightly different reasoning, and this is I can't take credit for this. David Viette in the FLAP group, Facebook group, made this comment, and I agree with it 100%. And what he said was, "Look, I support the right to civil disobedience." And Cindy, you said it perfectly. Some of the, or actually, it might have been Heather actually who said it. Some of the most important changes came out of civil disobedience. Okay, but here's the thing. Civil disobedience is meaningless unless there's some consequences behind it. If you walk out of school and you're not facing any consequences, that's not civil disobedience. That's, okay, you get a pat on the head for doing something, but that's not anything meaningful. If you're doing something that you feel passionately about, yeah, you should be prepared to accept the consequences. And you know what? That gives more meaning behind the civil disobedience itself.
There was some talk, there's a lot of back chatter when the children in Leominster walked out that was driven and encouraged by the teachers. We've seen that again in this past walkout where a lot of teachers were supportive and walked out with the students. Is it a concern that teachers are leading political protests with their students? Is it a concern for anyone?
Well, of course it concerns me. I mean, there's good and bad that comes with it. I mean, you want to encourage children to be civically involved, but you got to be neutral about it. You can't push your own agenda on a child. You need to push the idea of being civic engagement, but you can't be pushing your own agenda. And just to circle back to what I said, I wholeheartedly agree with. You got to take an absence, and if you're at 7, then you're at truancy. So I completely agree. There are consequences, and there need to be consequences for what you do. I just get a little concerned when we're very quick to throw out the term truancy, when maybe it's only their first absence, maybe that's only their second absence, and so I don't want to discourage. I'm afraid that if we label it in a very negative connotation, it will discourage civil engagement. I just think that we need to be careful about that. But to your point, teachers should be encouraging the concept, but not their own agendas.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think the teachers shouldn't be organizing any of this. What they should be doing is hopefully opening the kids' minds to look at the issues, and if you feel strongly about the issues, do something about it. But I shouldn't be putting what I believe into your mind. You need to develop that on your own.
Absolutely.
I agree, and you're right about truancy. There is, specific information, but delinquency to a minor is a little bit broader definition. It's trying to influence anybody under 18, and that includes school teachers. Now, if that's a guidance counselor advising the kids that, all right, you've been to the student council, you've been here, nobody's listened to you, you got it. What can I say? You have rights, you have First Amendment rights. I'm for that. Let the kids get permits, let everybody get ready, public safety-wise, parents, everybody be prepared for this. But to have your child, and especially your special needs child or a child that's a little out of control right now and not, hard enough to deal with, and you're just letting them cut loose in town, and you're disobeying the teachers. What happens when they get home? I can disobey you. I'll call 911. It goes around.
And some of them, it's just easy to walk out of class. It's a fun thing to do. Everybody else is doing, let's do it, Yeah,
when I cut loose, we didn't go downtown. We went for the woods, and we went out, we skipped town.
Michael, should teachers be involved in helping facilitate these protests?
No.
Regardless of issue.
No, but like you just said, regardless of issue. I mean, this has been going on for a long time. Okay, this has gone on. We've heard reports of this, and I wasn't there. I'm not going to say they were doing this in Leominster or Fitchburg. I wasn't there, but we've heard reports of teachers doing this when they've had contract negotiations. Having students, support their own self-interest. Allegations of that anyway. I personally haven't seen it, with my kids, but it's something that it's something that's been going on for a long time with a variety of different issues.
And I think it was actually political, not really the teachers. I mean, we're blaming teachers on a broad spectrum now. There's sometimes is the union representatives, but I heard it was political kind of nuances that led to this. So I believe it's a more political thing, because why would a teacher lead the kids on that? It doesn't make sense in that realm. But a political stance to start a fire for political gains, maybe.
Is it something that the school committee should address as a policy, to look at it as policy, where we're seeing the increase in these walkouts?
It's a new norm.
I don't think it's necessarily a bad idea to make sure that it's being done in a safe manner. You know, there's lots of different reasons why we should maybe put some sort of guidelines around it to make sure kids aren't wandering in the streets and such. But something that's just kind of struck me a little off here is that, you know, these kids think for themselves. So I'm not positive that all of this influence is just from the teachers. I mean, these kids see what's happening. It's impacting their lives directly, not mine. I'm not in school in those situations. So I think that we should still acknowledge that they have ideas of their own and that they're protesting on their own a lot of times. If there is a teacher influencing them, we should look into that situation. But kids have their own minds and they're taking charge of it.
Issue 3, Donald Trump is moving to impose tariffs on imported steel. Just recently announcing that he's seeking more tariffs against China, and the stock market took a tumble by about 700 points on that announcement. Are tariffs good or bad for the economy? Heather?
I don't think that we can link these two together. Tariffs can be a very good, useful economic tool when used right. And there's, you know, 4 or 5 different types of tariffs that can be used. I think the bigger question is, what is this administration trying to accomplish with a tariff? To me, it seems like everything's a nail to a hammer. And I question the motivation behind this in particular. And also, while I think that it may help a small subsector of our business, about 200,000 direct employees in those 2 industries in the United States alone, there's a lot of products made in the USA with raw materials that are imported. So I think we need to be really cautious about how this is going to affect the economy as a whole, not just a little sector.
Cindy?
Yeah, I agree. This particular one on the steel, I know what he's thinking, because a lot of the steel products from China have been coming over here, and they're not really as good a quality as American made. So he's thinking, you know, China's getting the advantage of making these steel products when we could do it right here in the United States. And but he's got to look at a bigger picture, because, like she said, 200,000 jobs you might create or save. But what about all the other millions of jobs that other industries that use these products? He's got to be careful with this. I'm concerned about it.
He thinks.
Yes,
Michael?
he does.
Yeah, I think
Thinks too much sometimes.
Echoing what Heather said, what concerns me about this administration is always the motive and what inspires this. Okay, and we talk about teachers being in the students' ears allegedly. I mean, you want to talk about people being in this guy's ear? I don't think he has an independent thought. That's just my opinion. And this is all people that are chirping in his ear. Okay, and they have these neocon ideas that they've been wanting to try out for 30 years now, and they finally get their chance because they have somebody so moldable and malleable to suit their interests. So I really question the motive here. In general, this is one area where I am conservative, and this is where conservatives used to agree with me. But you know, I don't support a lot of trade restrictions. I support free trade mostly, and conservatives and Republicans used to do that. I used to support that as well. We wouldn't have the advancements in automobiles and electronics and all these technological advancements we've made. Automobiles today compared to 40 years ago, no comparison whatsoever. And that is because of a lack of trade restrictions, not because of them. If we had put some of the tariffs and trade restrictions that people have been wanting to put on since the 70s and 80s, a lot of them sponsored by liberal Democrats and some of them sponsored by populist Republicans, we'd probably still be driving around these Chevy Novas that get 15 miles to the gallon on leaded gas.
Oh, but those were reliable cars in the day.
Well,
Geez,
you
I
say
had one.
that, but
I had one.
a lot of shots of them broken down on the highway, and you don't see that with these zippy little cars nowadays.
Dan?
I'm against it because it lands on my intended constituents, the little guy. It comes on to us consumers. Tariffs is a president's tool. That's one part of government that's hyper political, so it's a political tool in their chest. So a lot of presidents have done it and used it. It's cutting our nose to breathe better for the short game, but we can't dance in the rain after that. So I'm against it, and personally, it hits home because it's going to affect my Hershey Kisses, you know. So
Yeah.
it's going to hit home hard.
Yeah, the
One of my
rappers
major
there,
food
yeah.
groups are going to be hit.
Yeah.
Wrappers are made in China?
It's aluminum. It's
Yeah,
one of the things
aluminum,
they're
yeah.
going to hit. So, and beer. One of the people I spoke to was Lisa at the Wachusett Yard up there.
Beer industry.
I was like, can I speak
yeah.
to somebody in authority about this tariff? I'm doing some research. And Lisa's like, yeah, I'll get you some in charge, but duh. Of course it's going to cost us money. Well, you know, she laid into me. You know, you
Beer
still want to
cans.
talk to him? I'm like, no, Lisa, I mean, it's common sense. I mean, everybody's running on such small margins, especially in Leominster. We have people expanding their Apple, you know, all kinds of things going on. So it's going to affect the little guy, the little businesses, and us consumers. So it's bad news.
So on one hand, as Heather mentioned, tariffs can help create jobs in certain specific areas, but it can also trigger higher costs and inflation, which affect everybody.
Yeah.
Where do we balance that? Which is the which is a higher priority, the creating jobs or keeping consumer prices under control? Anyone?
Jeez, I think you got to balance. Yeah, it's a hard balance. It's hard to balance that, but I think in this case, I just think I think the tariffs. I think it's a bad idea. To be
National
honest, I really
interests
do.
instead of political interests
Yeah.
should be engaged when
This is his fight against China. He's trying to make a point against China because, you know, they've taken. They're the second largest economy next to us. You know, and I think he fears that bothers him. So his ego's getting in the way on this because he's like, they've been screwing us for so long. We're going to take care of this, and it's like, but you're going to hurt us by doing so.
What's interesting is our #1 importer of steel is not actually China, it's Canada. So, and aluminum, we get a lot of steel and aluminum
And he's not
from
putting any
Canada.
tariffs on them, so.
That's right. So, and I understand that they may be excluded from the tariffs.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that what we're may be trying to target, because I don't know what he's thinking, is not really the biggest importer
No,
for us.
it's China that he's targeting. It's not necessarily the steel.
Which is strange because his cheap crap, the clothing that he manufactures and his daughters are made in China.
And they're making a lot of
So
money
it'd
off
be
of it.
important to see the whole layout of that issue
Yeah,
and where that
exactly.
plays out, because that's not just a policy. It's just one little mini tool
Yes,
in
exactly.
a policy that they're trying to set for national interest. So we don't know.
Yep.
Prediction, yes or no, does he pull out of NAFTA?
Yes.
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 I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think so.
Be the lone wolf. You could be the hero here, right?
No, I just don't. I don't think he has it in. He's got enough problems right now to deal with, and
Think NAFTA's safe?
you know, I think a lot of people are going to have some issues, and they're going to have to justify their stances, and I think that'll stand.
I know he's trying to have it renegotiated, but it doesn't look like
Yeah, it
Justin
doesn't
Trudeau in Mexico.
It doesn't seem to be working the way he wants it to.
The great negotiator.
Right.
Hard to negotiate with nations, you know. This isn't somebody who works for you where you can say you either do it or you're fired. This is a little bit different.
All right, Easter's coming up. Peeps or no peeps?
Oh, no peeps, please.
No?
Ugh.
Disgusting. What do you think? No.
I had issues with Peeps when I was a youth, so I looked into it a little bit, and I will now try the Peeps rice squares. I'm going to go with the Peeps frozen pudding pops, and I'm working on the Peeps hot chocolate. So you started something.
Work in progress.
There you go.
Peeps or no peeps?
I despise them, but they bring back good childhood nostalgia, so I'm going to say yes.
They're good for finger playing, you know, squeezing.
Yes.
And it's fun to
but all
microwave
Make
them.
puppets with
Yeah.
I'll take the Cadbury chocolate any day of the week.
Yeah.
That's true.
Heather De Jesus, Daniel DeBrule, thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
joining us on
Thank
Flap
you.
TV. We'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.